Kevin, really good to see you again. Hope everyone's all right.
Very well, thanks, Summit. Yeah, good to see you as well.
Let's start with the recent announcement by the Prime Minister. The commitment, his vision that in 10 years' time we'll all be stirring our coffees and driving our cars all powered by wind. I mean, for all the things that have been going on with COVID, and we'll talk about that in a minute, this was quite a fairly bold statement about kind of where he wants to see. What did he say? I think the phrase was that the UK could be the Saudi Arabia of wind. What was your reaction to this? Because it's a big statement about where he believes the direction of travel is for the country.
Yes, and yes, it is sort of topical at the minute, isn't it? And there's also reference to energy efficiency as well, I think, in terms of making sure the UK isn't lagging on lagging. So more good sound bites. But I think that that commitment is welcome. Clearly, it's with an eye on COP26 in November next year, and clearly the UK needs to set out its positions on some of these key topics, and also as we go into a sixth carbon budget, we're agreeing the sixth carbon budget with the Committee for Climate Change, and so that debate is going to happen in the meantime. So I think it's right. We've got to the point where government does need to start to, I guess, make some decisions on some of these big ticket items. So yeah, offshore wind is one in terms of the ambition. I think there's obviously the EV rollout, electrification of transport, CCS as well, sort of in that mix, as well as hydrogen, and also nuclear, kind of also as a big topic. So I think those are the key areas, and energy efficiency, as I mentioned, is the other probably leg of that. So it's welcome to hear those ambitions. Reinforces, I think, some of the manifesto commitments as well, and hopefully
Yes.
this will all come together, in a plan for that sixth budget, and also around the COP26 discussions.
I think the thing is, I suppose, for the energy sector, and there's been lots of reaction to it, it sort of says, and as I said, we'll touch on COVID, that, there is life beyond this pandemic, and there is a longer pathway, which is really vital for the whole country to tie into. And I suppose in this time of uncertainty, perhaps that is a good thing for energy companies like yourselves to feel that actually we do know that the long-term goal is still quite central to this government's mindset.
Yeah, exactly. That's really helpful. And as you say, there's an investment story there for the industry, and an employment story there in terms of that recovery, the green recovery from the situation we're in today. So I think, all of that helps us in terms of giving us the confidence, reinforcing those messages, and I think there's fairly broad political support as well, across that agenda. So we really sort of welcome that. I think we clearly we need to see then, understand the mechanisms that are in place, the funding,
Sure.
the policies, and there's an energy white paper sort of in the mix, which is long delayed, I think.
Yes, long overdue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which hopefully address on some of that topic of how some of these things will be put in place.
Let's talk about coronavirus, and obviously we're speaking at the time where unfortunately numbers are going back up, and it's pretty much clear we're in the second spike. But I suppose the difference is everyone, politically, business-wise, we all realise that the economy has to continue this time. We can't go into full lockdown, even though there may be elements of lockdown all over the place. But we look at that. So in terms of the businesses that you're dealing with, how have you had to adapt your way of dealing with them? Because there will be these peaks and troughs for these businesses. They'll have to do things and adapt, and you'll have to adapt how you deal with them, won't you?
Yeah, that's right. It is an incredibly uncertain time, obviously, for everybody, and obviously it affects our customers has affected them in very different ways, depending on which sector they're in, and the nature of the impact, certainly of that first lockdown. We are seeing, I guess, from a demand perspective in energy supply to business, we're seeing that slow recovery continue, pretty much in line with how we'd thought about it after that first sudden collapse in demand, which was affecting some parts of the market by 20-25%. So a real shock to the system, and creating stresses in the energy market actually, and it's kind of
Yeah.
hung together, which is also encouraging. So now we're on that recovery path, as you say. I think this, from all we can see at the moment, and sort of verified by those demand numbers, those consumption numbers that we can see certainly in our portfolio, and I think shared with other suppliers. We are seeing that continue despite the sort of increasing number of local lockdowns, and as you say, that's really the nature of these lockdowns is very different to the first sort of self-imposed reduction in economic activity, I guess. So it remains to be seen clearly, how this pans out and whether any more radical measures might be needed. But it's been relatively encouraging to see that continue, and we all know the reasons for that from a kind of political and macro perspective. So yeah, we've had to adapt the way we do things, just to sort of pick up on your specific question, and respond to different customers' needs in this market. Offer payment plans where we can, where we see that particular sectors are really struggling. Some sectors are performing as well as ever, or doing well. But yeah, it is a mix. It is a change, and yeah, we've had to adapt as a supplier to help them through that, help to understand the sort of the energy market impacts as well. Work with them to understand what their consumption profiles are likely to be, so we can best manage their position as well. So yeah, that effort continues. Everyone's on kind of high alert to continue with that. Yeah, it's going to be again an interesting winter, but as I said, demand is kind of coming back.
Are you feeling that the business, like every business, has had to learn to adapt after the initial shock in March? Do you believe that Engie is in a better position now, so you would be able to say, actually, we know what to do with those businesses that are struggling? We know what. Let's look at the tech sector; it's booming. You know what to do where demand goes up, or we're going to have to be more consultative. What would you say your ideas are now of how you adapt your business? Because you'll probably have lots of staff back working from home yourselves.
Yeah, and exactly. It's what the issues that other businesses have are reflected back within internally within Engie. So clearly, yeah, absolutely. Sort of technology is really key to that. We were lucky, I guess you could put it that way. We were able to move to work fully remotely very quickly and maintain service levels at a really good level. So there's been great continuity, and we know we can therefore go back to that as and when we need to, and having that kind of comfort, I think it's a stress test you wouldn't normally put in place, you wouldn't normally try out, but now we know we can do that. We've got that confidence to, I guess, adapt as a business, and like everybody, look at what is in a world beyond COVID, if there is such a world. I guess at the moment it's hard to envisage, but assuming there is,
it will be there. Yeah,
it will be that. So it's how do we obviously adapt to change our office footprint, improve flexibility for our employees, continue to supplement with more technology to help that, and obviously everyone's been exposed to that and is examining that. And yeah, we've looked pretty hard at it over the last few months. We've already got our plans for our mode of working beyond this period to result in a much more flexible, permanent way of operating. So yeah, and we can see again, it's the different ways therefore how we contact customers, how we reach customers. Everyone's feeling their way through this and learning.
Well, have you come up with new products? Are you thinking of new products? Because the world will be different. There'll be certain sectors that will go, and there'll be new sectors that will come. So are you now already thinking about the way you'll do more sort of projects or products you might need to do for this new kind of more adaptive way of working, maybe for the next few years?
I think there is something in that. So I think this sort of shift away from office-based activity and a move towards more hot desking, flexible office space. There are products in the market there, sort of desk booking systems, and office and building management systems, smart building systems that we do have within our capabilities within Engie. And there is some product
Sorry to
development.
interrupt, you're going to have to adapt. You're going to have to adapt to if a business says, look, Kevin, we're going to be like 2 days a week, and then but I need to be busy at this period. You might have to build different. You might have to provide different services in different times now. So you'll have to be more flexible.
Yeah, that's it. So it is all around the needs of the customer, as you say, and we do have a significant kind of services business supporting commercial office space, and so it's that area particularly that we'll need to adapt. And as I say, we can start to bring in some technology to help support customers make that change as well, and we're doing that ourselves for our own internal use.
Where are your hopes moving forward regarding kind of? Let me ask a fairly blunt question. Do you think the energy market has performed well during this? Because many would say, actually, despite all the things we complain about, it's been fairly robust, hasn't it? It's dealt with the fall, it's dealt with the return, it's kind of kept the lights on.
Yes, it has. I think that the two areas of vulnerability, if I can put it like that, have probably been around, yes, on the sort of wholesale side, the generation side, we've seen those periods of very low demand, very high level of renewables, therefore a high proportion of renewables, which has tested the operation of the system, and as you say, keeping the lights on and making sure there's sufficient flexibility there, and at times that has been expensive for the system operator to maintain that, because it has been a fairly extreme situation. But that is a bit of a window into the future as to how the system is likely to be, back to our discussion on growth in offshore winds and other renewables, that where the system increasingly is penetrated with renewables, then those challenges will increase over time. So maybe it's given the national grid and others a bit of experience of that in the short term. But yeah, the market has sort of held together. It has increased some of those industry costs. It does impact suppliers to some extent because of the collection of those costs on behalf of industry, with demand being on an aggregate level lower than it was. So those unit costs go up in effect. So that's created a bit of stress at the other end. And we see some of that rippling through in some parts of the supply market. Actually, so those are probably the two areas that we're seeing. But overall, as you say, things have moved on. The regulator and government have been fairly responsive on some of those issues and tweaked a few things here and there to help it through. So we haven't had any kind of catastrophic impacts, and with good monitoring and I think collaboration amongst everyone in the industry and stakeholders, it's seen it through.
Are you working as a group on new pathways to net zero, new net zero products? Because, as we say, we will get through this, and the direction does seem to be, thankfully, that people want to get towards cutting down their carbon profiles. Businesses want to start to reduce. So are you working now on things that you might be able to offer in the future?
Yeah, so I mean, this is this period has sort of coincided with our own journey on this in terms of developing new products and again responding to requests from customers around zero carbon. And I think we're in a sort of commitment phase more generally at the moment, where companies, organisations are looking at matching government's commitment on net zero, or being more aggressive, or adapting it for their own situation. What we do find though is there is a gap, of course, in terms of actually having a plan to deliver on that. And I think from what we've looked at and surveyed, I think around about 30% of organisations who've got that commitment actually have a solid plan to move forward. And I think that's understandable given the long-term nature of these things, and some of the solutions are probably not even available as of today. So really the question is around building a roadmap for that, and identifying the upfront actions that you can undertake, and planning through and working through some of those longer term solutions. And so we're certainly working with companies to help them essentially develop that roadmap, which basically involves quite a lot of upfront work actually, and it's more than you think, isn't it, in terms of analysing your carbon footprint as an organisation, what the levers are that you can you can pull in effect to reduce that footprint down. So there's a lot of upfront work, I think, that needs to go on, and then you're into the sort of broad categories of solution, and you've got to go from reduction, which energy efficiency and other things can help with that. Conversion of technologies which organisations employ. An example there is moving fleets towards electrification. Then you've got kind of green sourcing of energy more generally, and then finally the whole topic of offsetting, which again, subject probably for another day. But those are the broad categories, and we're certainly working with customers both sort of nationally and internationally on developing a roadmap kind of along those lines, and then identifying what those concrete action plans concrete actions might be in the short term, and seeing where we can help them with that.
They would say probably that sounds great, but I do need funding for this. And right now I'm trying to keep the books balanced and I don't want these things on the balance sheet. Can a company like yours help with that? Can you offer solutions around that so that they don't have to make that initial outlay?
Yeah, exactly, and that's definitely part of this plan for us in terms of how we develop our products and how to develop those partnerships with customers. So yeah, certainly we've got access to funds and green bond funding that would be targeted in this direction, allow us to work with those customers to help finance some of the assets and projects that they might need. And of course, they have the option to look at a variety of different sources. And I think this is quite often some of these investments really do help the bottom line in terms of the operating costs. So therefore is quite appealing in the current environment. There's maybe a barrier there in terms of that initial funding, but I think the economics that are available can be quite persuasive. So even under the situation over the last few months, when clearly there's lots of potential sort of barriers, people necessarily don't have the bandwidth to cover this stuff. That's the way I think to try and address the arguments and identify the quick wins where that's possible.
And just to end with, why should businesses partner with Engie as they try and get on this journey? What would you bring to it?
I think for us it's that broad-based approach. So we're no longer just an energy utility, and so whilst as I manage directly, we're heavily involved in energy supply and green supply, including kind of matching up with renewable projects into corporate PPA type products, which is I think a really key element of some of these plans. It's that ability to look across the piece at EV capabilities, at projects, at services, and combine that up into a more holistic plan, because it goes beyond just the kind of commodity of energy. Really gets into actually other utilities, waste, water, the whole carbon footprint, which needs looking at. So I think that's what we bring to organisations, is that broad approach and having expertise and coverage in a lot of those different areas.
And finally, how will you change? Because you'll need new skills and new people, as you're talking about. It's more sort of consultative. It's kind of new technologies. Do you see yourselves changing as a company in the future?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And we've already we made as a group, we made a change last year to start to put together that consultative arm. So there's a group called Engie Impact who look after that at a high level, the sort of international companies and pan-European companies, and working with them on these high-level roadmaps. So that's where it kind of started, and we're now looking to develop that in each of the regions for the group. So yeah, I think it does change that. It does, as I say, broaden the the expertise that we need to sort of input into those arrangements.
Kevin, thanks very much for your time today.
No problem. Thanks, Sumit.